because a lot of people say, oh man, it's exciting, there's a story on your life coming out. But it's the hardest part of my life. It's the biggest trial, the biggest pain and tribulation I've ever experienced. And so although it's exciting, it's also, it brings back, old things in a sense. I because of that whole situation of losing my wife to cancer, I really battled with trust in the Lord. And it was a big part of what I had to really learn again, to reestablish, God, okay, you're good. And I trust you in the midst of hard times.
This is CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. I'm David Sand.
And I'm Victoria Robinson.
Today we have with us someone who has won many, many awards, been nominated for Grammys. He's put out 12 albums. He's one of the most successful guys on the concert circuit. We're talking about Jeremy Camp.
Great guy. I've never heard anything bad about this guy. In all the circles, David, that we're in with a lot of people in this industry, I have always heard really great things about him, and not only him, his wife, Adrienne, too.
Well, if you love the movie I Can Only Imagine, from the producers and the directors of I Can Only Imagine comes a brand new film called I Still Believe.
I am so excited about this movie, David. I think these Irwin brothers are on to something.
Back in the day, remember when they used to do movies based on songs like You Light Up My Life? Remember that?
I do. Debbie Boone. I used to sing that song all the time. I didn't do it justice, trust me.
Yeah, I can imagine that you didn't.
Oh, no pun intended. Well, you're also going to learn how come he almost stopped sharing his personal story that's on the big screen and who it was that talked him out of that.
Really, the story is about how he got through a tremendous tragedy, which was the loss of his first wife, Melissa, to cancer. But
not long after they were married.
Yeah, but we're not going to give away the movie here. And by the way, this movie features an all-star cast. It has KJ Apa in it. Shania Twain is in it.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Sinise is in it.
Yeah.
This is a great...
They weren't messing around.
No. They got a great cast thanks to the Irwin brothers and Kevin Downs, the producer. They really know what they're doing.
This interview is not just about the movie, I Still Believe. It's about their marriage. It's about decisions that he made, the challenges that he's had throughout his career. This is a really good one. You don't want to miss it. Here he is, Jeremy Camp.
Perhaps under some of the most interesting circumstances I've ever done an interview. So I have to set this up. We're at your little palatial place here in Palm Desert.
Yes.
A gorgeous place here that you have.
Thank you.
You've redone. And the fire pit, the pool, all the modern luxuries. And then we're sitting in this little room, allegedly going to be your studio.
It is. Which will allegedly soon not have the loud reflections.
And we walk in this reflection, so we have to record with a mattress by our side.
See, this is what I love about transparency. We're just telling everybody this is not like we're in the studio right now and it's all perfect. This is a mattress that is right next to our head so that it doesn't reflect and echo so much.
Hey, this is show business.
That's exactly.
This is the glamorous world of show business.
Yeah, if anyone ever wondering about that, then this is definitely show business.
So here we are. It's got to be somewhat surreal that here's this movie, I Still Believe, that's based on your big song, your best-selling book.
Yeah.
This movie's coming out, and I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah.
First of all, it's got to be really, really bizarre having this heartthrob play you.
It is. I mean, when they first talked about this kid, KJ Apa, playing me, I wasn't really sure who he was. And so, I kind of looked up some things and I was like, I hope he seemed to be a kid that most people knew who he was. I mean, every time I would go and, on stage and say, and then there's a kid, KJ Apa playing me, all the girls would go, yeah, scream. And I'm like, okay, I guess you guys know who he is. But what I love about KJ portraying me is that he cared a lot about getting things right. And there was times where he'd pull me aside and say, Jeremy, what were your emotions in this time? What were you thinking? And he would really put his whole heart into it. At one point, he was method acting where he didn't sleep for a whole day and basically just, had a scene where he was supposed to have been up for a couple of days, and he kind of was, in real life. And so you kind of see that emotion, and it made him emotional. And I really love that he cared that much about playing the character to put his whole heart into it.
Let's set the stage here. I Still Believe, which is soon to be in theaters, is about a chapter of your life.
Yeah.
Take us back, 20 years?
Yeah, it'll be actually 19 years coming up, which is crazy to think about because there's been so much life that's been lived since then. And this whole story, it's hard because a lot of people say, "Oh man, it's exciting. There's a story on your life coming out," but it's hard because it's the hardest part of my life. It's the biggest trial, the biggest pain and tribulation I've ever experienced. And so, although it's exciting, it's also it brings back old things in a sense. I because of that whole situation of losing my wife to cancer, I really battled with trust in the Lord. And it was a big part of what I had to really learn again, to reestablish, God, okay, you're good. And I trust you in the midst of hard times. And so, although it's exciting, it's been not an easy transition of reliving things. Like I've seen the movie and I've wept, every single time I watch it, I cry. But here's the flip side. In 2 Corinthians, it talks about that we will comfort others with what we've been comforted. And I've realized that through this whole thing that I'm going to be able to share the comfort that God's given me to many people that have gone through hardships and loss, and to say that God is faithful in the midst of that. Now, I don't have the answer. I don't ever want to say I understand because everyone experiences their pain and all that stuff differently. And I just want to be able to encourage in some way, God's hand leading and directing in the midst of hard times. And so I'm excited, but I understand the weight of responsibility involved in this as well. And I'm preparing my heart for it and asking God to give me strength.
So how weird is it to go to the theater and see this chapter of your life up there on the big screen, to go through it again, to go through the loss of your wife, Melissa, your first wife, Melissa, all over again?
Yeah, it's been challenging because, for instance, we had a screening that we did with a good friend of mine, Greg Laurie. He's a pastor. You probably heard of Greg Laurie. He's an evangelist. And we decided to do a screening at his church with 2,000 of his church members. And I'm watching it for the first time with a bunch of people. And it was hard. And I remember I basically went, afterwards, and we had an interview. And I told the crowd, because it was right after the movie was over, he's like, "Jeremy, come on up." And so I came up and I just said, "Guys, I need a second," because watching it, I remember it's almost like I was there. And people don't understand that. Like when you experience that kind of grief, and I've never watched a film being made in my life, so I've never experienced that part of it. But, when I'm sitting there and I'm watching something play out of a moment when she, passes or when she is going through the pain of the cancer, I remember that. And so those emotions get brought up again. So it's not easy. And so I think I always try to tell people, hey, just know that this is not one of those things where I just like, yeah, it's a great movie and it's going to be great. And I still have to deal with the emotions of it, but it's worth it because I know God's going to use it. And that's why it's worth it.
What's it like when you go through this with a first wife and then you have the new wife?
Right. Right.
And by the way, they want to make a movie that's 95% about my relationship with my first wife.
That's exactly right.
20 years later.
Yeah. And I think that's the reality is that, one thing I love about my wife, Adrienne, is, I have a wife and 3 kids. So God has been so faithful and blessed. And my daughter's 15 and, almost 14 and my son's 8. But Adrienne has been one of the biggest proponents of all of this from the very beginning. And this is why, because for one, it takes a very strong woman to be able to allow, someone she's married to talk about, someone that he's been married to for years. But I remember her telling me one time, because I stopped sharing about it after a while because, it's not easy. It's not like I don't want to just share my story because it's not an easy part of my life. And she said, "Why do you not share anymore your story?" And this is years ago. I said, because I don't want to make it just about a story. I want it to make sure it is authentically like it's something that God has laid in my heart to share. And she goes, "Listen, God is using this to minister. I've seen him use it to minister to many people." She goes, "It ministered to my life. Don't ever stop sharing the story. Of course, if you feel like that you're not supposed to for some reason, of course don't." She goes, "But it's not about you. It's not about me or Melissa. It's about Jesus." And that to me was such a display of her heart. And I think that's the whole thing with this movie as well. She's not ignorant to the fact that, of course, it's going to be a little bit strange because people are going to fall in love with me and Melissa and go, oh man, and then go, oh, who's that? Wait, who's he married to now? I mean, that's just a reality. Like all of us are, we're human, we get it. But I think what's on her mind constantly is, it's not about me. It's not about Melissa. It's not about you. It's about building the kingdom of God. I think that was what drives her and keeps her sane and keeps her going, it's okay. So yeah, I mean, it's not like it's been an easy road either doing this, because there's a lot of challenges involved in doing a movie and going through emotions and talking through things and, dealing with things that you didn't realize you're gonna have to deal with. But it's all worth it for the end goal. And that's to glorify Jesus. And that's it.
So the song itself, tell me about how that happened. I Still Believe.
Yeah. So it was probably, 3 weeks after she, went to be with the Lord. And I remember I had gone through some crazy emotions, of course, and throwing my Bible across the room, and anger and just natural grief things of just confusion, all that. And I remember it was a moment where I was probably at one of my lowest, and I just was like, I thought about doing things I shouldn't do. And I mean, honestly, it just was like to kind of cover the pain and mask the pain. And all of a sudden God said, pick your guitar up. And he spoke to me so clearly. And I was like, wait, what? And last thing I wanted to do was to pick my guitar up. You know what I mean? Because my guitar signified me ministering, and I didn't feel like ministering. And so it kind of was this wrestle I had with him. And finally, after a few times of him saying, pick your guitar up, I picked my guitar up, and all of a sudden what came out was that song. And it starts off saying, scattered words, empty thoughts, because that's what I was feeling, seemed to pour from my heart. I've never felt so torn before. Seems I don't know where to start. And it was just this very honest, raw emotion of what I was feeling at the moment. But then all of a sudden, what came out, and the only thing I could say was, but I still believe in your faithfulness. I still believe in your truth. I still believe in your holy word. Even when I cannot see, I still believe. And I think that is signifies really who in the Old Testament, when you're looking at David and he said, my God, why are my enemies prospering? Why? He's asking questions, or he's feeling these feelings, but he always ends up saying, but God, your loving kindness endures forever. You're just, you're merciful, you're kind, all these things. He starts off, being real and raw, but he ends up saying, but God, you're good. And Jesus on the cross, you got to understand this. People don't ever talk about this very often, but when Jesus was on the cross, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? He had a moment of question. Now, did he sin in his questions? Absolutely not, because he was without sin. But he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? There was a moment of just going, whoa, what's happening here? But he didn't get stuck there. He said right away, but he goes, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And there has to be a moment of surrender. We can have questions. When we start questioning God and it starts becoming this thing, that's when it starts getting difficult. But it's okay to say, God, I don't understand. I'm confused. This hurts. I have questions on these things. But there's got to be a point when you say, but I still believe. Even when I cannot see, even when it doesn't make sense, I still believe. And that's the moving forward part of what God wants to draw us to.
You've been at this for a couple of decades.
Yeah, which is crazy. It is.
It's hard to believe.
We've talked before many times. Yeah, it's crazy.
What has been your biggest challenge looking back over the last couple of decades? There have got to be times that you go, man, this Christian music thing is not what I thought it was cut out to be.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think that's with everybody in ministry and dealing with people and dealing with your own flesh and dealing with, motives that get thrown in there that you don't want to have those wrong motives. And that's just the fact of it. And I think that I've battled just like everyone else. And I've had my times of distractions, times when I realized that I've been just working and that's it. My dad used to say, you get so busy doing the work of the Lord that you forget about the Lord of the work. And I've had those moments where I feel like I'm doing the right things because I'm serving the Lord, but my heart is just so busy in the practical side of doing the work of it. And God is constantly keeping me, on the plumb line of like, okay, this is what it is. Here's where you're supposed to be. And he shows me like, you've kind of got off here. And he's been so faithful with having people in my life, my wife. I have great people around me that aren't yes people. They're not, yeah, whatever you want, or it's okay. And they tell me, my manager, for one, his name is Matt Baum. He's been my manager for 18 years. he will call me out and he'll say, okay, Jeremy, you're being a brat now. He won't let me get by with it. And I don't want him to. That's been such a good part of me learning how easily we can be distracted if we don't continue to keep our faith and keep our eyes on Jesus, and we don't open up God's word and keep grounded that way. What keeps me going is the fact that I know, because it's not always easy. It's not always glamorous. It's difficult. I mean, I've had people many times after I put out a record or a song, just be like, I think Jeremy's done. This is the worst thing he's ever done. And you're like, oh my gosh, just, gut wrenching things. And even recently just going, maybe I'm done. And people, saying, I think Jeremy Camp's done. And then all of a sudden God's like, no, I'm not done with you yet. Like, I'm going to do more things with you. And you can't rely on what other people say. You got to get up and say, God, have you called me? If you've called me, then I'm going to move forward no matter what is going on around me. And that's what I think I've done. I've just said, okay, Lord, you called me to minister the gospel no matter what, no matter to what degree, to, what size of crowd, I'm still going to go out and share what you've done in my life, because that's why I do what I do, is to serve Jesus and nobody else.
So let's name the other cast members in the movie.
Yeah. So, you may have heard this singer possibly named Shania Twain. I don't know, most people have, but it's incredible to me how the cast came together, because I really feel like that, everyone has put their heart into it. They didn't agree to it because it was like a big payday, because, there wasn't a big payday. It was more like, you want to do this film about this story, and everyone wanted to do it. So Shania Twain, one of the biggest country female artists almost ever, sees the story and says, I want to be a part of that. Gary Sinise, who's Lieutenant Dan, people know him as Lieutenant Dan, but he's been an Oscar nominee actor, is in the film and wanted to do it. And then you have KJ Apa, this heartthrob that is getting literally asked to do everything, sees the story, reads the script and says, I want to be in this. Britt Robertson, who has been alongside of George Clooney in Tomorrowland and Dan in Real Life along Steve Carell, and, done many, many movies and TV shows. And she's like, yes, I want to be a part of this. And my whole point on all that is everyone involved, which is a huge cast, even up to Melissa's sister, Melissa Roxburgh, plays Melissa's sister, Heather, and she's the lead in this TV show called Manifest. She decided to play it. And this kid, Nathan Parsons, who's the lead in this TV show called Roswell, he plays my mentor. So everybody just said, I want to be a part of this. I think it's because they see something different here. They sense that it's not just a fabricated story, because it's not. It's a real story of love, but not just love, but a love that someone got through realizing that faith and their faith in Jesus made it possible.
What did your dad say when he found out that Gary Sinise was going to play him and Shania Twain playing your mom?
What's hilarious is that my dad told me that people at church would call him, hey, what's up, Lieutenant Dan? And they'd call my mom, hey, Shania. They would have these little fun little things. What I love about my parents is they kind of were just like, that's really neat. But it wasn't, I think, because my dad's a pastor, been a pastor for years, and, mom's been supporting him for years and doing that. And I think for them, it's an honor and it's neat, but they want to see this movie impact people's lives. And that's why they're excited about it, but they are pretty excited. It's a neat thing to watch, and how I think people are more excited, that are friends with them. Like, oh, I can't believe that they're playing you. So it's been fun.
So did you really meet your wife, Adrienne, the way that they reveal in the movie?
Yeah. So it is pretty similar. The only thing different is the timeline. She didn't actually follow the story, but she heard me when we were on tour together talk about it. So we were on the road together. So you see that, and you hear her listening to me talk about it. That is real. And she did come to me at one point and say, tell me more about Melissa. I want to know more about Melissa. And I would share stories, and her telling me, later, Melissa really impacted my life, and there's a point where in this story, in the movie, it says, she tells me, hey, I'm one of those one people that was ministered to. I'm that one person. Because Melissa said before she died, she goes, if one person's life is changed through my suffering, it's all worth it. And so I get a little emotional about this one. But so when Adrienne told me, I'm one of those one people, I think that just blew me away. And, then you see at the end of the movie, us together, and kind of show the updated version of us that are in our family. I don't know if you've seen that part, but it's an updated version that's really beautiful, showing where we are now and what God's done now. So honestly, yeah, it's incredible to see how they took the story, had to add a couple little timeline differences just because it's a 1.5 year journey, combined and squashed down into 2 hours. So, but it's incredible. They did their research and they wanted to make it as accurate as possible, and they did.
Going back 20 some years, you did not expect to be an artist in the beginning, right?
Yeah, I went out to Bible college. My thought was, I love music, but it wasn't, I want to go on stage and it wasn't that. And, I think as I got to school, I started, seeing doors open for me. So then it was like, okay, well, obviously this is what God has for me, then great. But I went out there to become either a youth pastor or a pastor, in which I did after I graduated. I was ordained a pastor, but I never have pastored a church. I just have that heart that I love people and I want to minister to people. But yeah, it wasn't, I want to make it. That's all I want to do. It wasn't that at all. It was more when I saw that God was opening the door, then I was like, okay, God, I'm going to work really hard and move forward in what you've called me to do.
How difficult is it to keep the ministry part separate from the business part?
Yeah, I mean, that's the lifelong challenge. I mean, you talk to anybody in churches as well, and anybody, it's finding that balance. I think you always want to always err on the side of ministry, of course. But if you don't become a good steward of what God's given you, then that can go away. The ministry side, you can always minister to people, but to do it in the bigger scale, like God has allowed a lot of people to do in music or even as pastors, you have to be wise. You have to be wise with me and my wife have always tried to seek the Lord on what to do with finances and who to give to. We're constantly giving and finding different ways to give and to serve. You got to make that. I think for me, if I could say, how do you find that balance? It's always trying to figure out how you can continue to give. That's how you find the balance. It's okay to figure out the business side of it because it costs a lot. Somebody asked me one time, what does it actually cost to do a show? And I'm like, you really want to know? And I think it blew their mind because it was 10 times what they expected. And that was just the cost, not even making any money. And I think that there's a misconception of what it costs to do this, to do it right. But I think that the way to balance that is to be wise, but always give and never, ever, ever try to hoard anything for yourself, because I'm telling you, you'll lose everything. I believe that, because you can hoard and try to gain all you can and build your kingdom. For one, you'll never be happy. You'll never be satisfied. But if you give and you give, you can't outgive God, and you'll find peace and joy and blessings that you'll never, ever experience in anything else.
Looking over the last 20 years, we've seen a tremendous amount of change in the music business. Do you find it invigorating? Do you find it liberating, as opposed to 20 years ago when you were at the beck and call and you had to follow the rule book set by a record label or whatever? I mean, now you can pretty much do what you want to do, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of freedom in that. And I think that, one thing that I've kind of stepped into and really understood later in life is that not all good things are God things. And what I mean by that is not all opportunity that seems like it's a good thing is something that God wants you to actually step into. And so I think a lot of what I'm experiencing is going, do I want to do that? Is that something that's going to, be impactful or bring me peace or bring about the most depth in ministry? And if it's not, I'll just say no. And I think that it's liberating to have that freedom. Not everyone does. And I think that for me, I don't want to take that for granted. And the fact that now there's a door opening with this movie that's far greater than anything I've ever experienced. And I've done a lot of things. And I think that for me, though, what's great about this new season is I've grown up a lot. And God said, I'm going to hand you this opportunity after you've learned a lot and been through a lot and had to grow, which I'm thankful for, because I think that my mindset's just different than it used to be. And I don't need another notch in my belt. I don't need to be like, okay, now I've done a movie and look what I've done, because I don't need that. I want to literally say, God, how is this going to greater impact your kingdom? And that has been me and my wife's prayer this whole time. Even this morning, I was praying that, is saying, God, and I have a little prayer list, and it says the movie, and it goes, impact for the kingdom. I mean, because that's what I want.
What is it that keeps your relationship with your wife in check, and what is it that keeps it exciting to be with her every day?
Honestly, I think communication. We have good communication. I think that's one thing that is very lacking in relationships is, you know, sharing how she'll tell me that I feel this way. This makes me feel insecure, or this makes me like, it's stuff that sometimes you don't want to say because you don't want to feel like you're bothering somebody. And it's like, well, then you're not going to get anywhere because you're going to start holding in and resenting things that maybe the other person doesn't know. And if the other person, even you tell them and they don't like you hearing it, that's something where you need to take control and start saying, okay, I need to honor my wife, listen to what she may be feeling. Even if I think it may be ridiculous, like, well, that seems like it's ridiculous. It doesn't matter. If she's actually feeling that way, then she's feeling that way. And so I'm learning to just go, it's really understanding to lay your life down as Christ laid down his life for the church, to lay your life down for your wife. And I'm starting to understand that more, and even my prayer times, just going, understanding God's word and washing her by the water of the word and giving her encouragement. And because I'm sometimes I'm not the best with words of affirmation, not because I don't care. I'm just not a words of affirmation guy. And so she is. And so I'm learning what drives her and what fills her up. And so I have to make it a mental note and really go, hey, your outfit looks great today, and it's actually work. And a lot of people, what happens, and I think in this story as well, and I still believe, it's a lot of people when there's rough times, I knew that she had cancer, Melissa, before we even got engaged, but I didn't walk away because things were broken. I didn't run away because it got hard. I just knew that love truly walks through the fire with somebody. And with Adrienne, it's like, I truly have to understand that even if it gets hard or things get broken, or you don't just walk away, you don't just give up. And I think so many people in this generation, because it's all about them and making themselves happy and people holding them back. It's like, that's completely the opposite of what God wants. God says to deny yourself, to pick up your cross daily and follow me. And I think that we have been told in this society to indulge yourself, take all that you want up, that for yourself, lay your cross down, you know what I mean? And don't let anything hinder you. It's complete opposite. That's what we are taught in this generation, in this society. And so it really is magnified so much in relationships, and even in Christian relationships, people are starting to buy into that. And it's like, we're missing out on the fact that a marriage is allowing us to iron sharpen iron, to come together and to realize that we're two broken people that need Jesus, and that we're just going to continue to hopefully encourage one another and draw closer to Jesus, even though it may get difficult. And so, yeah, it's a long way around of saying all that, but there's just a lot of stuff that I've learned. And me and my wife, we wrote a marriage book coming out in April called In Unison. And we felt like that we wanted to write a marriage book, not because we have it all together, but we've learned so much. Been married for 16 years, 3 kids, and I've learned a lot. We've learned a lot, and we wanted to share what we've learned. And it's just an exciting season for us to now kind of tell our story after this. I'm going to share, of course, always this, but go, hey, this is what God's done now, what he's doing now in our relationship.
What is the biggest challenge you face in your marriage?
Sorry.
You have to take a drink for that one.
I don't need a drink for that one. The greatest challenge. I mean, it's hard because it's hard to say there's one greatest challenge, because I think in marriage, there's many challenges. There's the challenge of, like I said, trying to figure out what makes them tick, trying to figure out, in a sense, what her love language is. There's the challenges of being gone. Like for me, it's being gone and then trying to reconnect. It's me being gone and then coming back into her flow sometimes when she's doing the flow with the kids, because the kids are homeschooled, and I'm like, hey guys, and I come and mess up the flow and let's go out. And they're like, we have school. I'm like, well, come on, I've been gone. And it's just, there's not one greatest challenge, to be honest. There's just challenges, and we've learned to navigate through those challenges by talking through them and asking the Lord to give us wisdom, and actually praying and saying, God, we can't do this without you guiding us and without keeping our eyes on you. And so, I think it's just, I wouldn't say there's the greatest challenge. There's many challenges that we face that we're learning to navigate through, that I'm thankful that God has allowed us to. We have our fights, we have our, wrestles, we have all those things.
What do you fight about?
Oh goodness. Like I may think that something, we need to go do this. And she's like, I don't think we should. That's not right. What do you mean? You think, and then it's like, are you disrespecting what my thoughts are? It's just the natural, those wrestles I don't think you should have said that to the kids. And like, what do you mean? Are you calling me, I don't love my kids? And it's like, no, it's not what I'm saying. It's those communication things those are just kind of wrestles that you go through, misunderstandings. Like, no, I didn't mean that. I wasn't saying that about you, and having to deal with that. It's just natural communication things. And we're just like everyone else. And so I think that with this book even coming out too, and the transparency that's in the book, you're going to see that, hey, we're just like everyone else. We're just going to encourage you and show you what we've learned and how to navigate through these different issues. And so it's been good. I'm excited to kind of get this next chapter out there.
How hard is it when you're on the road? You're on the road for how long?
Probably 100 days out of the year. But
Wow.
Here's what's been really great, and kind of what you said earlier about I can kind of do what I want now in a sense. I mean, in that sense of the freedom. Like this tour coming up, we're doing a tour, and they're coming with me the whole time. I got a bus for just me and the family, and they're just going to come out with me because it's going to be right in the middle of the movie coming out. And we all want to be with each other. And so, she's going to, in a sense, have sacrifices of being like, okay, I got to do school on the road and got to be uncomfortable by being on a bus, and having to go from city to city. But she and the sacrifices that we've had to make are, we want to be with each other. So whatever it takes to be with each other is what we're going to do.
When you're on the road, I'll be happy to house sit here.
Yeah, there you go.
Let me ask you, when you got the call from, I guess it was the Irwin brothers, right?
Yeah.
That said, hey, we want to turn your book, your song into a movie.
Right.
That must have been somewhat surreal. And we have to say the Irwin brothers are the geniuses behind the previous movie, I Can Only Imagine.
Yeah.
So first of all, you went to see I Can Only Imagine.
Yeah.
We all fell in love with that, and that was incredibly successful at the box office. I think it was the #1 independent movie.
It was of the year.
Of the year, yeah. So you get this call. That must have been somewhat surreal.
Yeah. I had this conversation with John Irwin, and he said, hey, I've read your book, and we're right in the middle of finishing I Can Only Imagine, and I was like, oh, and I know Bart was kind of mentioning it to me, but I didn't know. Bart even didn't know to the degree of what it was going to be. So he was like,
Bart
Millard, yeah, from Mercy Me. He was like,
and that was his story.
He has his story, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, it might be like a Hallmark film or something. He just didn't know. And so when John came up to me, at first I was like, yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. Let's just talk more. So at first the movie hadn't come out yet, I imagine, and no one really knew what was going on, to be honest. So when, of course, it did really well, he called me again and said, we really want to do your movie. And so then I got serious, and I was like, okay, let's start talking. And they talked to me, and they were like, we probably won't do this movie next because we don't have two biopics right next to each other, Christian music, people right next to each other. I said, oh, that's fine. Doesn't bother me. I'm just thankful. And then all of a sudden, they did an interview with me and my wife, and they went, we have to do this story now. And Lionsgate got involved. And somebody at Lionsgate knew me and knew my story and said, oh, no, we have to do this story now. And honestly, it's the right timing. Like, it feels like it's the right timing. I feel like that.
Wait a minute. This is the Hollywood story. This is the real Hollywood story. When one movie works, I think made $85 million.
Right.
It was made for a couple million or so.
Right, totally.
That's the Hollywood formula. We have to do the sequel, but we can't do the sequel, so we have to find one almost like it. That's the truth, right?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know if that's the motivation behind it, but all I know is that when they did the movie, it was so heartfelt and so genuinely deep that I'm going, whatever the thoughts behind everything were, it's real and it's legit. So I'm excited.
Have you had anybody that has seen the movie that has said to you, wow, I cannot believe that you want to put that up there and relive this all over again?
I haven't had those comments, and this is probably why. Maybe someone's thinking that, to be honest. The reason why I don't think I've had those comments is because I think when people watch the film, I mean, you've seen it, when you watch the film, you realize like, oh, wow, this is going to be an encouragement to many people. So I think when you watch it, you don't go, wow, how could you have that be up there, because you don't leave the theater feeling hopeless. You feel hopeful, and you feel like, wow, but look what's happened now. Look how God has used this now. And so I think for me, because it's done in a way where you realize the impact that it could have on many people's lives, you don't go there. You just go, okay, I get it. And I think that's what I've heard from many people is like, wow, I get it. And it's touched my life. I have people that I never would have thought that don't like Christian movies at all. I'm just telling you, they just don't. That go, I was completely moved. I did not expect that. That was way better than I thought it would be. And I really am moved. And so I think for me, it's reaching and crossing some barriers that a lot of movies haven't crossed for even friends of mine that are kind of blown away by this movie. So it's exciting to see what God's going to do.
Well, it is very helpful. It has a lot of encouragement.
Yeah.
For someone who is going through what you went through right now, how can this movie help them not get over, but get through it?
Right, for sure. Because there's no formula. One thing I've learned with grief, there's no formula. You don't say, this is how you do it, this is how you get through it, because everyone experiences things differently, and everyone processes things differently. One thing that I can say, and as I think watch this movie, is for one, you have the sense that, as the Lord says in his word, that I'll never leave you nor forsake you. You have that sense there that he didn't the whole time. He was there, and he was the source of encouragement, the source of hope. And then understanding that the scripture where it says this momentary affliction is nothing compared to the weight of glory in store for us in heaven. I think that there's that understanding that literally what we face is so temporary compared to what God is revealing for us in heaven. And you kind of see it in the film. It was temporary. Not that I don't have feelings of emotions or hurt. That's not what that means. But there's a sense of this isn't the end, And then understanding too that it's okay to grieve. I think people that are grieving, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to let go. But then there's a point when you, like I said earlier, you got to surrender and say, okay. So I think it's going to give people a lot of sense of true hope in the midst of whatever trial they're going through. I think they're going to say, yeah, I just need to trust in the Lord. And it's such a simple, basic, I don't know, just phrase that you can even say, just trust in the Lord. But I think you're gonna see it to a greater degree when you watch this movie.
So what's next? What do you see on the horizon after this?
Yeah, me and my wife really have a heart for missions. And, we just found out that this movie is going to be in almost over 80 countries. And, I've always had a heart for missions. I have a ministry called Speaking Louder Ministries that we've gone to several countries and did outreaches. And I went to Uganda recently and did an outreach in Kampala. We had 35,000 people show up and 1,000 people respond to the gospel. And that really is my passion for the lost and for missions. And, while we were there, we try to make a lasting impact. So we work with churches, and we actually built a medical facility in Entebbe, Uganda, that will help 50,000 people with medical supplies. And I think for me, it's just going, God, I feel like you call me to reach the nations, and I see now to a greater degree how that's going to happen. I feel like it's through this film, and I feel like through the film I can go to these different places and hopefully be a source of encouragement to those nations.
Well, thank you, my friend. This has been great, and thanks for opening up your home. I really appreciate you having the extra mattress
that we were able to
get rid of the echo in the room here.
Hopefully next time you come, it'll finally be my studio where I'll have everything.
We'll have to put a picture of this up on the website so people know what we're talking about.
You have to.
Have you noticed the mattress, actually, the sheets match the
It does.
couches?
It's very gray. Everything's very gray in here. That's why I'm ready to put some different color in here. Monochromatic.
well, best of luck to you. And then we know the film is going to be a big hit, and it's going to move a lot of folks.
Awesome.
Really minister to a lot of people.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
So I cannot emphasize how important it is to go see this movie if you are going through something that you just think there's just no way I can get through this.
Go support this movie. I still believe.
And you will be entertained. I mean, this isn't just a message movie. It's a great movie to go see with someone who possibly is going through something.
Yeah, exactly. Take someone with you, and first class cast, directors, producers, and an incredible movie with a great message.
I'm David Sams.
And I'm Victoria Robinson.
And you've been listening to Contagious Influencers of America, the podcast from the producers of Keep the Faith.
Hey, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram or go to KeepTheFaith.com.
Now, if you enjoy the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review Contagious Influencers of America.
Be sure you join us next week. And of course, as always, thank you so much for listening.
And go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a heck of a lot more fun than living it in black and white. See you next time.